This is the Extra Point Podcast from Arizona's family.
All right, just about set to get started with the second half of the season for the Arizona Diamondbacks. Are they going to the playoffs? Will they regress? Let's talk to a man who actually wrote an article today about that on Sports Illustrated's Inside the Diamondbacks, the one, the only Jack Sommers. You see him down at Chase Field. You hear his questions nightly on the Extra Point. We love when Jack asks questions. Joining us here on the podcast. Jack, first of all, how was your All-Star break?
It was fantastic. Had a great time. Enjoyed watching the Diamondbacks All-Stars and had a little bit of time off, so it was good.
All right, I have one bone to pick with baseball. I say get rid of the All-Star uniforms. How do you come out on that deal?
I am 100% with you. I do not like it at all. Even if they designed them better, I probably wouldn't like it. I'd prefer them be in their team uniforms. I think it makes the players more easily identifiable.
Well, and it's such a good moment, too. I don't think we talked about the podcast taking this kind of turn right out of the box. But, to give a guy a moment to tip his hat on national TV, and they kind of ran out in some weird football way, and it just seemed like whoever produced the All-Star Game had never seen one before.
Yeah, it was very awkward. I mean, there are certain traditions that are worthwhile keeping, and having them line up on the baselines and be in their own uniforms. When you look at pictures of old All-Star games from years past, you immediately recognizable because they're in their own uniforms. And these homogenous uniforms, to me, they all kind of blend together.
Yeah, and if those kids can get off my lawn at home as well, that would be cool. I'm an old curmudgeon here. Okay, so let's talk about the Diamondbacks. This young, exciting, fun team I love surprises in Valley Sports. It seems like when teams don't have a whole lot of expected, we've had this happen a couple times, they come out of nowhere. Do you feel like the Diamondbacks technically came out of nowhere to take the lead in the National League West so early this summer with what they have on the roster?
Well, it was certainly unexpected. I mean, the second half of last season provided a lot of encouragement, right? There was some really good young performances from players that came up, and exciting brand of baseball, stealing bases, playing good defense, a bit more hitting. Of course, you got, Corbin Carroll, Jake McCarthy was great last year. And of course, Zach Gallen had the second half for the ages with his 44 and the third scoreless inning streak. So there was a lot to like about what we saw in the second half. But, on paper, prognosticators, statistical projections, all of that, Vegas lines all had them in the vicinity of a 500 team, right? Some had 77, 78 wins, some a little more optimistic around 81 or 82. But I don't think anybody expected them to come out and take control of the division for as long as they did in the first half.
What do you think was the key or the keys to the Diamondbacks leading the West for most of the first half?
Well, I would say that up until the final 2 weeks before the break, scoring over 5 runs a game was a big key, right? They got a lot of really good offense. Some of it might have been a little bit of overperformance, but the offense carried them as well as their good defensive play. And offense is everything, right? The pressure they put on teams with their base running, the best base running team in the league. But it wasn't just that. I mean, they were in the top 5 in measures like OPS and of course, runs scored. So despite some of the issues that they've had on the pitching side, they managed to, run up a win total pretty much on the basis of a good offense.
So you did the math here, and your article right now is up on si.com/MLB/Diamondbacks. I believe I have that right. Where you kind of you examine the topic we're all thinking about. Is this going to last? What are some of the, bullet points to your article to trying to figure out if the Diamondbacks are going to go to the playoffs or regress?
Well, there's a lot of things stacked up against them when it comes to looking at whether or not they're going to regress in the second half. I just want to preface by saying, hey, they beat our expectations so far, and the game is played on grass and dirt, not on paper. So you never know what's going to happen. I'm not predicting anything, but looking at everything that I'm able to look at, it sure seems like there's a number of indicators that regression is going to hit them maybe somewhat hard. I would start off with their recent performance, right? They came into the break slumping, going 4-7. Over the last 11 games, they barely hit over 200. with a low 600s OPS and scored 2.9 runs a game. That slump may have been a long time coming, but overall they followed up their 6-game win streak with a first-game win against Philadelphia in mid-June by losing 3 to Philly, and overall going 11-14 since then. So over the last 25 games, they're 3 games under 500. They kind of stumbled in a break offensively, the one thing that was really keeping them going. So the recent performance is a trend that isn't great. Now, they may have been getting worn down a little bit. They play max effort baseball, and not only max effort physically, but they really depend on being very sharp mentally, right? This isn't a team that makes a lot of mental mistakes. And so, sometimes all of that can kind of wear down on you, especially when they had that streak of 17 games in a row. So I would say recent performance, number one, and especially that batting slump. When you look at the batting, we look at sometimes metrics, the expected stats, expected batting average, expected slugging, and expected on-base percentage. A lot of that comes from StatCast, Baseball Savant StatCast, where you have launch angle, exit velocity, and actual walks and actual strikeouts all kind of rolled into a formula that lets you know, is there a gap between the expected performance and the actual? Amongst all major league teams, the 2 teams that have batting average and slugging above their expected the most, the Cincinnati Reds and the Arizona Diamondbacks. So 2 surprise teams are outperforming their underlying metrics. Teams that on the other end of that spectrum include the Dodgers and the Mets have underperformed their underlying metrics. So that's one other indication that there may be some issues, coming their way. Maybe what we saw the last 11 games before the break was an indication of that.
Well, I'm old enough to remember in 2007, I was actually just talking to Chris Young about this when he was at Chase Field for the MLB Combine, when they went to the playoffs with a negative run differential. So my question to you, and I love asking people the question because I love stats. I love getting into it. Is there a stat for clutch? Is there a stat for the answer backs?
Well, in April, they hit 301 with runners in scoring position, or 300 on the nose, excuse me. Since then, it's about 230.
Interesting.
It's not predictable. So if you're asking me, are they clutch? Are they going to outperform everything going forward? I can't answer that. Nobody can. Anybody that tries to tell you they know who's clutch, who's going to be clutch, I should say, in the future versus not, who's going to come through in high leverage, clutch situations, they don't know. Nobody knows. It's not predictable. It never has been. Guys get reputations for that based on coming through in big moments, but that doesn't mean that they will going forward. It's just that simple. It's not predictable.
I'll take Corbin Carroll every single day, even on last Saturday. How much do you think just his energy, just the young energy, young legs, has elevated this team? And have you ever seen a rookie like this, do what he's been able to do his first 100 games in the big leagues?
Well, this is certainly one of the better rookie seasons, I've seen in my lifetime. I've seen a few. I've been around watching baseball since the 60s. So, but he's terrific. He's an all-around great player. He runs, he fields, he can hit for average. He takes his walks. He's got a strikeout rate under 20%, which is really nice. And of course, he's got, all of that power in there that a lot of people didn't maybe not have realized that he had. We kind of saw that monitoring him coming up through the system. And he's put it all together, right? He handles everything so well. We saw even during the All-Star break when he was mic'd up, he went out of his way to give credit to his coaches and to his teammates that maybe should have been in the All-Star game that didn't get there, such as Merrill Kelly and Ketel Marte and Christian Walker, and he made sure that he did that a couple times in interviews. And then after the game was over, and the next day, what did he do? He went to his hometown Little League and hung out with the kids playing Little League there and signed jerseys and had conversations with all the kids. Instead of taking a day off and just chilling, he went and gave back to his community. So that's the character and the type of person you have. You roll all that up into one package, and clearly the Diamondbacks extended the right guy.
I wonder if he hits the wall. And getting back to your article in Regression, and it's kind of a negative thing to talk about, but I feel like it's very topical, and I applaud you for having the guts to write it and examine it and see where we are. And I think everybody who follows this team and has enjoyed it wants the magic to continue, and why not? But when you look at the numbers, you say, okay, here's where they're at. And Mike Hazen's looking at it. Emil Osadeh's looking at it and saying, okay, how can we get better? What are some of the other factors there in your article that you think, okay,
well,
the forecast? Yeah.
The pitching depth. And Mike himself said on the radio recently, he was a little concerned about not having enough depth in the rotation and in the bullpen, because there's a lot of young pitchers, and when you get down into late September and, hopefully the postseason, what does that look like? How many innings? I talked about, for example, Ryan Nelson and Tommy Henry, professional innings, majors, minors combined. Last year, they topped out at 154 and 160, something, in that range. And so they'll blow past that number by mid-September for sure, and then they're going to be in uncharted territory in terms of workload. So, you have the ups and downs that you expect from a young pitcher, a rookie or a second-year pitcher in the first place. Then you have the question of, how much can you extend them into the postseason? So that's one big question that they have. Unfortunately, Zach Davies hasn't pitched as well as they had hoped and hasn't been able to provide the innings that they hoped. So, he's only made 11 starts. His ERA is over 6. He's 1-5. And he was being counted on being stability at the back of the rotation. You can, now you have Merrill Kelly, is recovering from a blood clot in his leg. And they just lost their long reliever, potential future high leverage reliever, and Dre Jameson to a serious elbow injury. He's out.
That one worries me for sure. Yeah, that worries me for sure.
So I would just say, all in all, the pitching, if they're going to be able to, they need to hold on for the next couple of weeks, and at least hold serve until Mike can bring in reinforcements. He definitely will need to.
How bullish do you think the Diamondbacks should be? How aggressive should they be in bringing in reinforcements when it comes to looking at the future of this ball club long term?
Well, I mean, that's a topic everyone is really keyed in on. Mike said a lot of interesting things. I think he's signaling that, he's not going to be reckless. He used that phrase. He said, I'm not going to be reckless. We could be aggressive, but he wants to see what the next 2 weeks look like before he commits fully to being a hardcore buyer. There's differences between just making exchanges, kind of straddling the fence in your moves, and maybe making a buy and even a sell move at the same time, or exchanging players of need with another contender. There's that. And then there's, digging deep into your farm system to really pull in some, mercenaries to help get you over the top, right? Being aggressive. So how aggressive they're going to be really depends on how they do over the next 9 days on the road and the 6-game homestand when they come back. I guess we'll get back to the article in a minute, but I think schedule is a good segue here. The rest of the season schedule is rated by Baseball Reference as the most difficult schedule amongst all National League contenders.
Ugh.
So that's the other thing that's stacked against them, is that they have a really tough schedule. They've got to play a lot of really good teams. They go like a 35-game stretch where they only have one team that's not a playoff contender, and that's the Rockies, but they're in Colorado, where you never know what's going to happen. Then they have, in September, they have a stretch where they have to play 17 straight days. I think it's from September 1st to 17th or thereabouts. So, the schedule is going to be tough. Now, they had a tough schedule to start the season, right? And we were all wondering, okay, how are they going to deal with these first 10 games, 8 against the Dodgers, 2 against the Padres, and they went 6-4. and they beat our expectations. They're going to have to beat them again. That's the bottom line, right? And then, the last thing is injuries. Up until the last week when Merrill came down with his blood clot and Dre Jameson came up with the elbow injury, they've been relatively injury-free compared to most other teams in the league. Carson Kelly missed the first 2 months, but they had Jose Herrera was able to fill in well, and Gabriel Marino was fresh at the start of the season, and so they didn't really miss Carson. And other than that, they didn't really have any big injuries, right, or any key injuries. They've been able to avoid those. The number of injured players that have hit the injured list, the number of days lost to the IL, et cetera, they rank among the healthiest or luckiest with health teams of anybody in the league. So, that's another factor that you have to think, well, okay, they've been lucky with injuries. They got the toughest schedule. They lack pitching depth, and they're very dependent on young pitchers that may be overstretched in late September. They've outperformed their hitting stats, and they've been slumping of late. That's a lot of things lined up against them. But again, I just want to go back to saying the game's played on grass and dirt, not on paper. And I don't know what's going to happen. I'm just looking at these things and saying, hey, it's going to be tough. It's not going to be easy.
Well, as you put pen to paper, and you did in the article, how many wins do you think it's going to take to get in the playoffs?
Well, okay, so the projection systems that are out there, I generally kind of look at 4 different places and then use a composite. So you have Baseball Reference, you have Fangraphs, you have Baseball Prospectus, and then you have 538.com. So they all produce projections and rest of season win totals and playoff odds. And using a composite of those 4, they're projecting 87 wins and giving the Diamondbacks a 59% chance to make the playoffs. Last year, Philadelphia made the playoffs with 87 wins on the nose.
Oh.
The year before that, I think the lowest win total was the Braves at 88. So, all things considered, where they're at right now, they're probably on the cut line, right? They're basically a coin flip, or maybe slightly better than a coin flip, whether or not they get in, based on the projections.
Do you expect the Dodgers and the Giants to, I guess, project upward, or to play better, just to kind of put it bluntly, here in the second half, to put some pressure on the Diamondbacks?
Well, certainly the Dodgers have the resources to add to their team, right? And we would expect that they would. It really depends on who they add, right? If they add Shohei Ohtani, then all bets are off, right?
Oh gosh, I'm sorry, that just makes me sick. But go ahead.
That's a sad thought.
Could the Diamondbacks add Shohei, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, maybe, sure, anything's possible. I'm not going to say no, but it doesn't seem likely. I think to get him for 2 months certainly would put the Diamondbacks in a position to make the playoffs and make a deep run. But they would have to give up a lot to get him.
You think he's gone? You think Shohei's gone from Anaheim?
Most likely, yeah. I mean, if they didn't get a deal done by now, I mean, he's going to get lots of offers, and who knows where he's going to end up. I'm not in the prediction business on that one. I mean, there's a lot of different thoughts. Maybe he ends up in Seattle or LA, the Dodgers or the Giants. I mean, I would guess he would end up on the West Coast, but can't rule out teams like the Yankees and the Red Sox and the Cubs. But I mean, with Shohei, the 10-year, $500 million that's being thrown around, or whatever they think he's going to get. I mean, yeah, he's worth $50-60 million a year right now as a two-way player. But I don't think he's going to be a two-way player into his mid-late 30s. So I don't know.
Interesting.
Right? I mean, at the age of 36, is he going to go out there and qualify for the ERA title as a pitcher and qualify for the batting title as a hitter at age 36? I kind of don't think so.
Which one goes first? Oh, this is fascinating. If you're Shohei, what do you focus on?
Well, I mean, he's going to pitch for as long as he can, right? Pitchers get hurt eventually. He's already had one major surgery, right? So, it's hard to say. But I would guess that his effectiveness as a pitcher would wane before his bat goes.
Interesting. All right. So as we're looking at the rest of the article here, looking at the metrics going forward, what are you watching? What are the numbers you're watching here in the next 9 days, whether it be Diamondbacks as they head to Toronto, Atlanta, and Cincinnati, or something around baseball that's going to give us an indication that there will be postseason baseball or there won't be postseason baseball in the desert?
Well, at the end of the day, it comes down to wins and losses, right?
It's my favorite metric, by the way.
They have to go out and win ball games right now in order for their general manager to be a hardcore buyer. Those are Mike Hazen's words, not mine. He's looking at the next 2 weeks, and those 2 weeks are going to determine whether or not he's a hardcore buyer. So at that point, however they can cobble together the wins, they've got to find a way. They got this tough 9-game road trip where they're playing, 3 teams that are all 50 or more win teams, right? And the Blue Jays and the Braves, and then who they got after?
The Reds, yeah, which is the scariest one, in my opinion. Even though I think the Braves are great.
Then they come home and they play the Cardinals, who may be last gasping to try to stay alive and not be sellers, but I think they're past the point of no return. And then you have the Mariners, who are still in the fight, both for their division and the AL wild card, and have been playing well of late. So that's it. I mean, those 15 games, they've got to win at least 8 of them, I think, or 9, in order for Mike to feel like really confident, like, okay, this is the time to go all in.
Oh man. Well, I guess
they end up going, 5-10 or 6-9, and they really struggle over these 15 games. That's definitely going to temper his willingness to make aggressive moves.
Yeah, pretty crazy. The season seems like it comes down to the next 9 days. So, all right. So this article's up right now. What's the next one kind of spinning in your mind? What's the next one that's going to hit there on Sports Illustrated that you're gonna dive into? What are you chewing on?
Well, I'm working on an article about Dave McKay and the relationship that he has with some of the players and coaches. So that's a kind of little pet project. He's a terrific man, terrific coach, and I'll kind of leak out here. The thought process is, I don't think there's a base coach or first base coach that's ever been elected to the Hall of Fame. If they're going to start, he might be the best place to start.
And he's in incredible shape too. What did he say anything about, like, his workout program or how he eats? That might have to be. I want to know. Every time I see him, he looks like he could still play. Yeah,
well, I mean, he hits it as hard as anybody. He hits that gym every single day. He's meticulous in the things he eats. He's as in good a shape as any man I know in their 70s.
He's in his 70s?
Maybe my dad. My dad's 91, and he still plays golf and is in great shape.
Wow. And you got the meatloaf going right now, so you got to go check the oven. What? I don't know if Jack's cookbook has come out yet. What goes into a good meatloaf?
So we put a lot of veggie into it, actually. We use ground beef and ground sausage, and then I throw a bunch of carrots and onions and garlic and celery and zucchini and mushroom into the food processor.
Oh.
So it's and then I, make some toast and make breadcrumbs out of that, a little Worcestershire sauce and some ketchup. And I put a bunch of jalapeno peppers in it too that I grew in my garden.
Oh man, that sounds delicious. It sounds like what Torey Lovello is trying to cook up with the Diamondbacks. So I'll leave you with this. If the Diamondbacks don't make the playoffs, is this year a disappointment? That's a great question, huh? Great question to leave you with.
Well, it depends on when you ask me. You ask me today, then the answer is yes. It is a disappointment if they don't make the playoffs at this point. Expectations have shifted. If you ask me on day 1 of the season, Anything over 500, finishing with 84, 85 wins, to me would have felt pretty good. Mike himself said, his goals, or the way he would define a successful season, was whether or not he could be a buyer at the trade deadline and whether or not he could play meaningful games in September. So he's on the precipice of meeting his goals for the season. And the team has exceeded my expectations for sure. So ask me today, look, sometimes I report, sometimes I analyze, and sometimes I react and I'm a fan. I'm all three.
Well, it was,
the fan in me hopes and expects them to make the playoffs, and it really does.
No, it's been so fun to watch. It's been so fun to talk baseball with you and cooking, and love to get down and maybe put you on TV at some point. But you do a great job. Once again, could you just tell people where to find your stuff and how they can access what you're writing?
So we're a part of the Sports Illustrated Publishing Network. Under Fan Nations, the name of the site is Inside the Diamondbacks, and the URL is si.com/MLB/Diamondbacks.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks for the time. Enjoy the meatloaf, and we'll see you probably in about 2 weeks out at the old ballpark.
Awesome, Mark. Look forward to it. Thank you.
The Extra Point Podcast is a production of 3TV, CBS 5, and azfamily.com in Phoenix, Arizona.